There is a tendency in modern thought to reduce the Book of Proverbs to little more than a religious version of motivational quotes. Phrases plucked from its chapters are sometimes used like slogans, painted on decorative wall art, or posted online, usually stripped of their context and deeper purpose. This widespread casual familiarity has, paradoxically, veiled its true nature. Proverbs is often read quickly, even skimmed, as if it were a book of fortune cookie wisdom, short, memorable, and easily digested. But those who pause long enough to look again will see something far more profound. The Book of Proverbs is not simply a moral compass for better behavior. It is not a checklist for good manners or a guide to polite society. Rather, it is a collection of divine insights embedded in human language. Its structure may seem simple, but its architecture is built on eternal truths. Proverbs reaches into the soul, aiming not just to instruct, but to transform. Each verse, compact as it may be, carries within it the weight of sacred revelation. It is a whisper of the divine, a record of heavenly wisdom offered to earthly minds. To understand Proverbs rightly, one must step away from the assumption that it is a manual for personal success or even just ethical conduct. Instead, it is a window into a conversation between heaven and earth. The wisdom presented in Proverbs flows from God Himself. It does not merely reflect human insight sharpened by experience. It reflects divine intention shaped by eternal love. The sayings of Proverbs are not human conclusions about how life works. They are divine disclosures about how life truly is. This realization begins to reshape how one should approach the book. Suddenly, the neatness of its structure becomes less about convenience and more about design. The repetition found in themes like diligence, speech, integrity, and the fear of the Lord is not redundancy, but reinforcement. These are not just repeated ideas, they are recurring echoes, calling the reader back to what matters most. When Proverbs speaks, it does not simply give instruction. It invites reflection. Its words settle into the heart like seeds, meant to grow over time into fruit that changes a life from the inside out. The Book of Proverbs holds more than wisdom for living. It holds a mirror to the soul. It examines motives, highlights blind spots, and calls for humility. One cannot read it honestly and remain unchanged. Its truths are confrontational, not in harshness, but in honesty. They pull back the curtain on human pride, laziness, deceit, and folly. But they do so with the intent to heal, not to harm. They expose wounds only to apply balm. Proverbs is not a harsh teacher. It is a faithful guide. And its goal is not simply to make one act wiser, but to become wise. Moreover, the Book of Proverbs does not stand alone. It fits within the broader tapestry of Scripture. It is deeply connected to the themes of the Psalms, the warnings of the prophets, the teachings of Jesus, and the letters of the apostles. When Psalm 1 verse 2 says that the blessed person delights in the law of the Lord and meditates on it day and night, that delight finds expression in Proverbs. When Jesus speaks of building a life on a solid foundation in the Gospels, Proverbs offers the blueprints for that construction. The wisdom of Proverbs is not separate from the rest of Scripture. It is interwoven, harmonized, and resonant. The sacredness of Proverbs is often hidden in its simplicity, but that is the genius of it. God chose to cloak deep truths in ordinary words. Rather than overwhelming the reader with philosophical complexity or abstract theology, Proverbs meets us in the familiar. It speaks of family, work, friendships, speech, finances, and desires. Yet beneath these ordinary topics lies extraordinary revelation. It is divine truth dressed in common garments, inviting even the simple to come and learn. And this is perhaps the most beautiful aspect of Proverbs, its accessibility. Unlike many sacred texts which require deep scholarly interpretation to uncover their meaning, Proverbs speaks plainly. It welcomes the young, the inexperienced, the weary, and the wise alike. It does not guard its treasures with complexity. Instead, it extends a hand and offers insight to any who are willing to listen. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 4 says it exists to give prudence to the simple and knowledge and discretion to the young. It is a gift of grace from God, handed down in a form that everyone can understand. But that simplicity should never be mistaken for shallowness. Just as a seed contains within it the potential of a great tree, each proverb carries depth that can nourish the soul across a lifetime. What seems at first to be mere advice soon reveals itself to be divine strategy. What appears to be a clever saying is in fact a spiritual key. The more one returns to Proverbs, the more it yields. Like a well that never runs dry, its wisdom continues to refresh and instruct, no matter how often it is drawn from. Those who dismiss Proverbs as outdated or irrelevant miss not only its beauty, but its power. In a world drowning in noise, confusion, and shifting standards, Proverbs stands as a steady voice. It offers clarity where there is chaos, stability where there is uncertainty, and conviction where there is compromise. It speaks to every generation because it originates beyond time. It carries the voice of the eternal into the language of the present. When one opens the Book of Proverbs, they do not merely read, they enter into a dialogue. It is as if wisdom herself has taken a seat beside them, ready to speak, correct, comfort, and guide. This is why Proverbs must be read slowly, not skimmed. It should be read prayerfully, not casually. Each word deserves to be heard, each sentence considered. For hidden within these ancient sayings is a living truth, one that speaks still, one that waits to be discovered anew by those willing to listen. To understand the true weight of Proverbs, one must not only consider the words written, but the voice behind them. It is easy to read through the chapters and see a list of well-crafted thoughts, concise observations, and poetic contrasts. But beneath the rhythm of the text lies the mind of a man who was granted something extraordinary. That man is Solomon, son of David and king of Israel. His authorship of much of Proverbs is not incidental. It is integral to how we understand the heart and authority behind the wisdom it contains. Solomon's name is inseparably linked with wisdom. His story is not only preserved in Proverbs, but expanded upon in the historical texts of Scripture. In the book of 1 Kings chapter 3, we find the moment that defined his legacy. Solomon, having ascended the throne, encountered God in a dream. In that moment, God offered him a gift. Solomon could have asked for power, for riches, for vengeance against his enemies. Instead, he asked for an understanding heart to judge the people rightly. It was a request not rooted in ambition, but in humility. He recognized the weight of his responsibility and knew he could not bear it without divine insight. God honored that request. He gave Solomon a wisdom that surpassed all who came before and all who had come after him. His insight was not limited to governance. It extended to every area of life, relationships, nature, decision-making, and spiritual truth. This was not just a natural intellect sharpened by experience. It was a divine deposit, an infusion of clarity that turned human observation into godly counsel. When Solomon wrote, he was not merely recording what he had seen. He was channeling what he had received. Yet, even as Solomon stands as the earthly author of many proverbs, he was not the origin of the wisdom itself. He was a vessel, not the source. The true author behind the pen is God. Solomon's wisdom was a reflection of divine light, not a product of self-discovery. This is critical to grasp, for it transforms Proverbs from personal philosophy to sacred revelation. It is not a king's opinion on how life works. It is a window into God's mind on how life is meant to be lived. That is why Proverbs begins the way it does. The very foundation of the book is laid in chapter 1, verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. These are not filler words. They are the key that unlocks everything that follows. Without reverence for God, the rest of the book becomes misinterpreted, or worse, misused. The fear spoken of here is not dread or terror. It is not the kind of fear that causes one to hide, but the kind that causes one to bow. It is reverence, awe, surrender. It is recognizing who God is, and in doing so, seeing everything else in proper perspective. Reverence for God is the starting point of all true wisdom. It is what separates divine insight from clever sayings. Anyone can repeat a proverb, but only those who fear the Lord can understand it fully. Reverence gives the heart the posture it needs to receive. It humbles the soul so it can hear clearly. Without it, wisdom is reduced to technique. But with it, wisdom becomes transformation. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10 echoes this truth. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. These are not two ideas. They are one path. Reverence leads to knowledge, and that knowledge reveals the very character of God. This connection between wisdom and God Himself is why Proverbs never feels distant, even when it addresses everyday matters. Because when Solomon speaks of diligence, or honesty, or patience, he is not simply offering advice, he is revealing what God values. Every instruction points back to the heart of the one who gave it. To know wisdom is to know something of God, and that is the beauty of Proverbs. It does not just teach us how to live, it teaches us who God is. Solomon's words carry weight because they were born from a moment of divine encounter. His pen was moved not by ambition, but by obedience. And while Solomon was far from perfect, his life later marred by compromise and misjudgment, the wisdom recorded in Proverbs remains untouched by his human frailty. That is because its source was never limited to the man. The channel may have faltered, but the stream remained pure. What was written was preserved not because Solomon was flawless, but because the truth itself is flawless. This understanding helps us approach Proverbs with both confidence and humility. Confidence, because the wisdom is trustworthy. It comes from a place higher than human reasoning. And humility, because to grasp it requires more than intelligence, it requires surrender. The fear of the Lord is not optional. It is essential. Without it, even the most brilliant mind remains blind to the deeper meanings of these verses. Wisdom cannot be grasped with the intellect alone. It must be received with a heart bowed low. In a world filled with opinions, theories, and advice, Proverbs stands apart. Its authority does not rest on the reputation of its author, though Solomon was great. It rests on the holiness of its source. Each proverb is a thread in a larger tapestry woven by divine hands. And the more one studies it, the more one begins to hear a voice behind the words, a voice that is not bound by time or culture, a voice that speaks still. That voice invites every reader to listen, not just to hear, but to receive, not just to understand, but to revere. It is the voice of wisdom, calling out from ancient pages into present hearts. It is the voice that once answered Solomon's prayer and now waits to answer yours. To read Proverbs is to come close to that voice, and to come close is to be changed. As one reads deeper into the Book of Proverbs, a shift begins to occur. What initially feels like a series of guiding principles slowly transforms into something more personal, more alive. Wisdom, which first appears as a concept, begins to speak. It takes on voice, movement, and emotion. It calls, warns, rejoices, and even walks in the streets. Nowhere is this more apparent than in chapters 8 and 9. In these passages, wisdom is no longer a set of ideals, it is a presence. It stands at the gates, it raises its voice, and it invites. Wisdom begins to look less like a quality and more like a person. Proverbs chapter 8 is among the most vivid portrayals of this transformation. Here, wisdom is not static. It is not reduced to principles printed on a page. It speaks as one who was with God from the very beginning. It says in verse 22, "The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, before his deeds of old," and then in verse 30, "Then I was beside him, like a master workman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always." This language stretches far beyond metaphor. It pulls the reader into something eternal. Wisdom here is not just divine insight. It is a divine presence, active in creation, intimately connected to God, rejoicing in the world he made. This passage stirred the minds of early Christians who saw in these words a striking resemblance to someone they knew, Jesus Christ. For them, this was not coincidence. It was revelation. In John chapter 1 verse 1, it is written, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That Word became flesh in the person of Jesus." When the Gospel of John describes Christ, it echoes the same themes found in Proverbs 8. Christ, too, was present at creation. Christ, too, delighted in the Father. Christ, too, is the voice of divine wisdom, now walking among men. The connection is not merely poetic. It is theological. The early church fathers, including figures like Justin Martyr and Athanasius, recognized in Proverbs 8 a veiled portrait of the pre-incarnate Christ. They saw the wisdom of God not as an abstract force, but as a person, Christ himself. This view did not diminish the practical value of Proverbs. Instead, it elevated it. If the wisdom described in these chapters is truly a foreshadowing of Christ, then each proverb becomes more than a rule for better living. It becomes a glimpse of the heart and mind of Jesus. Understanding wisdom as Christ brings a new depth to every instruction. When Proverbs speaks of honesty, it reflects the truthfulness of Christ. When it honors humility, it mirrors his servanthood. When it calls for integrity, it echoes his righteousness. The traits described in Proverbs are not random virtues. They are the contours of Christ's own character. In this way, Proverbs becomes not just a book to learn from, but a mirror to see him in. Every principle becomes a window, every line a whisper of his voice. This realization also transforms the reader's relationship to the book. No longer is it just a manual for moral improvement. It becomes a way to draw closer to the person of Jesus. To walk in wisdom is to walk with him. To pursue understanding is to follow his lead. Proverbs 8 verse 35 says, "Whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord." These words carry even more meaning when seen in light of Christ. He is the one in whom life is found. He is the one through whom favor flows. He is not only the teacher of wisdom, he is its embodiment. In Proverbs 9, the personification continues. Wisdom prepares a feast, sets her table, and sends out her maidens to call from the heights of the city. She says, "Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. There is a call to the hungry, to the empty, to come and be filled." This too bears a striking resemblance to the ministry of Jesus. He fed the multitudes, not just with bread, but with truth. He invited the weary and burdened to come to him and find rest. He described himself in Matthew chapter 11 verse 29 as gentle and lowly in heart, and said that in him souls would find rest. Like wisdom, he stood in the public square of life and offered something eternal. There is beauty in realizing that Proverbs does not simply describe wisdom. It reveals a person, and not just any person, but the one through whom all things were made. This realization changes everything. It means the Book of Proverbs is not a collection of detached advice, but a revelation of divine character. It is as if each verse were a fingerprint, each principle a reflection, each call to righteousness an invitation to know Christ more deeply. This also means that the pursuit of wisdom is not a lonely path. It is a journey with a companion. Christ does not just show the way, He is the way. He does not just speak wisdom, He is wisdom. This understanding is reflected in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 30, which says, Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness, and sanctification, and redemption. That verse is not an interpretation, it is a declaration. Christ does not possess wisdom as a tool. He is wisdom, embodied and eternal. To see Jesus in Proverbs is to see the book come alive. It becomes more than ancient instruction. It becomes present reality. The voice that called out in the streets of Jerusalem now calls out in the pages of Scripture. The invitation remains open. Whoever is simple, whoever is searching, whoever is burdened, let them turn in here. Let them listen to the voice of wisdom, not as a distant concept, but as a living Savior. The one who delights in God, the one who was with Him in the beginning, the one who now speaks still. When Proverbs speaks, it is Christ who speaks. His words are not only preserved in the Gospels, but echoed in these ancient verses. The wisdom of Proverbs is not separate from the wisdom of Jesus. It is the same voice, the same truth, the same heart. To embrace wisdom, then, is to embrace Him. To walk in understanding is to walk with Him. And to live by the words of Proverbs is to let Christ Himself shape the soul. It is a common misconception that the Book of Proverbs only speaks to those who already walk in wisdom, those who seem morally upright, emotionally balanced, and spiritually secure. At first glance, the sharp contrasts it draws between the wise and the foolish, the righteous and the wicked, the diligent and the lazy, may seem to leave little room for anyone caught in the in-between. It may seem as if Proverbs sets up a world of moral binaries, of absolutes where only the strong survive and the weak are left behind. But this impression misses the deeper heartbeat of the book. Proverbs is not a celebration of the already wise. It is an invitation to those who are not. Its truths are not locked behind gates for the spiritually elite. They are laid out like bread on a table for the hungry, offered to any who will reach out their hand. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 20 says, Wisdom cries aloud in the street. In the market she raises her voice. This is not a private gathering for the righteous. It is a public call. Wisdom does not hide in temples or libraries. She goes where the people are. She enters the chaos and confusion of daily life and calls out with clarity. Her voice is not reserved for the perfect. It is aimed at the wandering. For those who are wounded, weary, and worn down, the Book of Proverbs may feel intimidating at first. Its sharp words about folly can pierce deeply. But these words are not meant to wound. They are meant to awaken. The contrast between wisdom and folly is not designed to shame the broken, but to stir them toward healing. When Proverbs describes the fool, it does not do so with scorn. It does so with urgency. It paints the picture not to condemn, but to caution. Each warning is a hand on the shoulder, not a finger pointed in judgment. The repetitive emphasis on the fool, the sluggard, and the mocker is not proof that Proverbs looks down on the weak. It is proof that God has not forgotten them. He speaks directly into their condition. He names it, not to expose them, but to redeem them. A physician cannot heal what is left undiagnosed. And so Proverbs does not flatter. It tells the truth. Not to break, but to build. Not to shame, but to restore. Many verses in Proverbs acknowledge the complexity of the human heart. Proverbs chapter 14 verse 10 says, "The heart knows its own bitterness, and no stranger shares its joy." This is not a statement about morality. It is a recognition of inner pain. It gives voice to solitude, to emotional struggle, to the unique sorrow each person carries. This one verse alone tells the wounded that they are not overlooked. Their bitterness is known. Their private sorrow is seen. Proverbs does not demand perfection before offering its treasures. It offers wisdom as the very means of healing. For the one who feels lost, Proverbs chapter 3 verse 5 brings a lifeline. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding." This verse is not directed only at the wise. In fact, it speaks most clearly to the confused, the overwhelmed, the unsure. It says, in essence, that even when your understanding fails you, there is another way forward. You do not need to have it all figured out. You simply need to lean in the right direction. This is the profound kindness of Proverbs. It does not ask the broken to fix themselves before coming to the table. It asks only that they listen, that they incline their ear, that they open their hearts. Proverbs chapter 2 verse 2 urges the reader to make your ear attentive to wisdom and incline your heart to understanding. These are postures of the soul, not achievements. You do not need credentials. You need hunger. You need humility. And if you have even that, wisdom will meet you where you are. Even the repeated call to get wisdom is not a demand for perfection. It is an offer of possibility. Proverbs chapter 4 verse 7 says, "The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight." This is not a message reserved for the successful or the strong. It is for anyone willing to begin. The path to wisdom does not require prior knowledge, only a willingness to walk. It is not the destination that is praised, it is the direction. For the weary, this book offers something vital: stability. Life may feel unstable, unpredictable, full of shifting shadows. But the wisdom of Proverbs is solid ground. Proverbs chapter 10 verse 25 declares, "When the tempest passes, the wicked is no more, but the righteous is established forever. The storm may come, the winds may blow, but wisdom builds a house that can stand." And the good news is that even the weary can begin to build. It is not too late to lay new foundations. It is not too late to rebuild what has been lost. For the wounded, Proverbs offers healing not through sentimentality, but through clarity. It does not numb the pain, it brings truth to it. Proverbs chapter 12 verse 18 says, "There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." This is not theoretical. It is practical. It tells us that the way we speak, the way we interact, the way we live, these things carry the power to harm or to heal. For the one who has been pierced by reckless words, wisdom offers an alternative. It offers the balm of truth spoken in love. It offers restoration through wisdom-shaped speech. And for the spiritually lost, Proverbs does not close its doors. In fact, it swings them wide open. Proverbs chapter 8 verse 4 declares, "To you, O men, I call, and my cry is to the children of man." There is no exclusion here, no list of qualifications. The call goes out to all. Wisdom's voice does not stop at the door of the temple. It rings out in the streets, in the alleys, in the homes of the uncertain and the hearts of the ashamed. Her invitation is clear: come, listen, learn, be changed. This is the thread that runs through the whole book: transformation, not condemnation. Proverbs does not draw a line between the righteous and the wicked so that one may boast over the other. It draws the line so that the one on the wrong side may know where to cross. The distinction is not a wall, it is a doorway. And wisdom stands at that threshold, not with scorn, but with open arms. For the one who feels too far gone, Proverbs whispers that the journey back begins with a single step. For the one who has failed, it offers a path forward. For the one who is burdened with guilt or paralyzed by regret, it says that wisdom is still within reach. It is not hoarded. It is offered. And it waits not for perfection, but for pursuit. There is a quiet brilliance in how the Book of Proverbs weaves heaven into the fabric of everyday life. For all its poetic turns of phrase and spiritual gravity, it never floats too high above the ground. It does not speak in abstract riddles or confine its relevance to sacred spaces. Instead, it walks into kitchens, sits at desks, stands in checkout lines, and speaks into the minutes and moments that make up an ordinary Monday. The genius of Proverbs is not only in what it says, but where it speaks. It reaches into the small and familiar to reveal what is eternal and true. For many, the assumption is that spiritual truth belongs to the exceptional, to the major life decisions, the turning points, the grand gestures of faith. But Proverbs shatters that assumption. It shows that divine wisdom is not only for the peaks and valleys, but for the path that stretches between them. It shows that how we speak to a coworker, how we manage our time, how we respond to frustration, how we treat a stranger, all of it matters. All of it reveals something of who we are, and more importantly, who we are becoming. Take, for example, the way Proverbs speaks about speech. Proverbs chapter 15 verse 1 says, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." This is not advice for public debate or formal argument. It is wisdom for conversation in a car, in a hallway, at the dinner table. It is a reminder that tone matters, that words carry weight, and that peace often begins with a quiet response. These are not lofty ideals. They are choices that present themselves 10 times before noon. They are reminders that God's wisdom is not only about what we believe, but about how we behave, especially when no one is watching. In the realm of work, Proverbs does not remain silent. It speaks clearly and often. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 29 says, "Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men." This verse highlights the value of excellence, of diligence, of doing one's task, not only with care, but with purpose. Whether one's work involves spreadsheets, soil, or service, wisdom calls for integrity. It challenges the habit of cutting corners or doing just enough to get by. It dignifies the daily grind. In Proverbs, labor is not a curse. It is a context in which character is shaped and God is honored. Financial choices, too, fall within the scope of Proverbs' instruction. It does not glamorize wealth nor demonize it. Instead, it brings clarity to its pursuit and use. Proverbs chapter 13 verse 11 says, "Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it." This verse quietly cuts against a culture of instant gratification. It promotes patience, discipline, and long-term vision. It offers a better path than gambling or greed, a path rooted in steady stewardship. It speaks not only to investors or entrepreneurs, but to anyone who handles a paycheck, anyone budgeting a grocery trip, anyone deciding between needs and wants. In the sphere of friendship, Proverbs offers insight that is both timeless and deeply needed. Proverbs chapter 17 verse 17 says, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity." This is more than a sentimental quote. It is a definition of true loyalty. It tells us that real friendship is not seasonal. It does not vanish when convenience fades or hardship arrives. It teaches us what to look for in others and what to become for others. In a world where relationships can often be transactional or shallow, Proverbs calls for something deeper, something enduring. Parenting, too, is touched by the wisdom of Proverbs. Far from offering a step-by-step manual, it presents guiding truths that shape how one raises the next generation. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." This verse speaks to the power of formation. It reminds parents that every conversation, every boundary, every act of patience or discipline leaves a mark. It does not promise perfection, but it affirms the importance of intentionality. Children are not molded by accident. Wisdom in parenting is not just about correcting behavior, it is about cultivating a soul. Even the way we plan for the future is addressed. Proverbs does not dismiss planning. It embraces it, but with a caution. Proverbs chapter 16 verse 9 says, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." This is not a rebuke against ambition. It is a call to surrender. It is a reminder that while humans can strategize, God remains sovereign. It keeps the planner humble. It encourages dreams, but roots them in trust. In this way, wisdom transforms planning from a form of control into an act of faith. What becomes clear as one moves through these verses is that Proverbs is not meant to be visited on Sundays and ignored the rest of the week. It is a guidebook for the in-between, for the moments that seem small but are actually sacred. Wisdom is not meant to be placed on a shelf. It is meant to be worn like clothing, to be lived out in motion. It is the filter through which decisions are made, not just at major crossroads, but at red lights, in meetings, during phone calls, in moments of silence. This is where Proverbs becomes deeply practical, even revolutionary. Because if divine wisdom can touch Monday morning, then it can touch every moment. It means no part of life is too minor for God's attention. It means that cooking dinner, replying to emails, fixing a broken appliance, or deciding how to spend the last hour of the day, these are all places where wisdom can speak. It means that holiness is not reserved for worship services, but can be found in the way someone loads a dishwasher or speaks to a barista. Proverbs shows that godliness is not abstract. It is visible. It is measurable. It takes form in habits and words and responses. It changes how one treats the people who cannot return the favor. It guides how one spends their time when no one is watching. It informs decisions that seem trivial but build a life. It creates consistency where there was once chaos. It brings beauty to what would otherwise be mundane. In this way, Proverbs becomes a bridge between the divine and the daily. It shows that God does not only dwell in cathedrals, He walks through neighborhoods. His wisdom is not confined to scholars. It is extended to laborers, students, parents, and neighbors. The sacred is not distant. It is near. It is present in boardrooms and broom closets, in calendars and commutes. Those who embrace Proverbs will find that life begins to take on a new shape, not through dramatic change, but through steady transformation. Wisdom reshapes the routine. It brings peace to pressure. It brings purpose to repetition. It infuses the ordinary with glory. And in doing so, it makes every day a stage for something holy. Proverbs is not a neutral book. It does not offer its insights from a distance, as if observing life from a safe perch. Instead, it plunges into the center of a conflict, a spiritual tension that pulses through every chapter. At the heart of the book is a battle, not with swords or armies, but with voices. Two figures stand in stark contrast, and they are not quiet. One calls to life. The other beckons toward ruin. One offers clarity. The other confusion. One is the voice of truth. The other of deception. This is the battle between wisdom and folly. This conflict is most vividly portrayed in Proverbs chapters 8 and 9, where the two voices are personified as Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly. They do not whisper. They cry out. They compete for attention. They both stand in the same places, the high points of the city, the crossroads, the public squares, calling to the same people. And yet, their messages could not be more different. Lady Wisdom offers understanding, security, and life. Lady Folly offers pleasure, shortcuts, and death. Lady Wisdom stands tall and radiant. Her voice is firm but tender. She does not hide or manipulate. She speaks with strength and transparency. In Proverbs chapter 8, verse 1, it says, "Does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice? She calls out to the simple, to those lacking sense, not to condemn them, but to offer a better way." Her invitation is clear and sincere. "Take my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold." Proverbs 8, verse 10. She does not offer flattery or comfort for the moment. She offers truth that lasts. Her words cut through confusion and bring order to chaos. In contrast, Lady Folly is seductive and loud. Her appeal is impulsive. Her promises are hollow. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 13 says, "The woman Folly is loud. She is seductive and knows nothing. She calls out, not to elevate, but to entangle." Her invitation is wrapped in secrecy and short-term gratification. Stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. Proverbs 9, verse 17. She offers what looks easy and feels good, but it is a mirage. Behind her door is not delight, but destruction. Verse 18 completes the picture, but he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. What makes this battle so urgent is that both voices speak into the same moments of decision. Whether one is choosing how to respond in conflict, how to spend time, what words to speak, or what desires to follow, both wisdom and folly are present. They do not wait for monumental crossroads. They are woven into the everyday. And while Lady Wisdom leads to life, Lady Folly paves a path to loss. This is not just a moral contrast, it is a spiritual war. It is a contest for the soul. The voices have not faded with time. They still call today, though their names may sound different. In the modern world, Lady Folly often speaks through entertainment that glorifies impulsivity, through media that prizes appearance over substance, through influencers who celebrate self over sacrifice. She speaks in advertising that equates happiness with indulgence and messages that mock restraint and discipline. Her voice is persuasive because it appeals to what is easy, what is instant, what is self-centered. Lady Wisdom still calls too. She speaks through scripture, through godly counsel, through moments of quiet conviction. She speaks through the example of those who walk with integrity, through the consequences of poor choices, through the quiet promptings of a heart aligned with truth. Her voice may not be as flashy, but it is enduring. It offers not only direction, but transformation. The battle between wisdom and folly is not about knowledge, it is about allegiance. It is not simply about what one knows, but whom one chooses to follow. This is why Proverbs is more than a book of advice. It is a manual for spiritual discernment. It helps train the heart to recognize the sound of each voice. Over time, the reader learns to distinguish between flattery and truth, between temporary satisfaction and lasting peace, between noise and wisdom. This discernment is desperately needed. In a world filled with competing messages, clarity is rare. Everyone is selling something. Every voice claims authority, but not every voice leads to life. Proverbs equips the soul to ask the right questions. Where does this path lead? What does this voice truly want? Does this decision reflect truth or temptation? The answers often make the difference between peace and regret, between stability and collapse. What makes folly dangerous is not just that it is wrong, it is that it pretends to be right. It mimics the shape of wisdom, but lacks its substance. It dresses up recklessness as freedom and rebellion as authenticity. It persuades the weary that shortcuts will solve what only character can build. It flatters the ego while hiding the consequences. Folly never tells the whole story. It speaks in half-truths and clever distractions. Wisdom, by contrast, is honest. She does not promise ease. She does not avoid discipline. But she leads to a life marked by depth, by clarity, by joy that is not dependent on circumstances. She builds, not by magic, but by truth. She requires something of the listener, but what she gives in return cannot be measured. Proverbs chapter 3 verse 17 says of wisdom, "Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. Her invitation is not into comfort, but into life, real, enduring, meaningful life." Each day, this battle begins anew. It plays out in decisions that may seem small but shape who we become. Whether to speak or stay silent. Whether to spend or save. Whether to forgive or hold on. Whether to honor or cut corners. In each moment, both voices speak. And in each moment, one must be chosen. Proverbs does not leave the reader unaware. It trains the ear, sharpens the eye, and prepares the soul to choose wisely. This is not a one-time decision. It is a daily discipline. To walk in wisdom is to walk with awareness. It is to pause long enough to hear, to discern, and to respond. It is to live with the understanding that every choice echoes beyond the moment, that every response carries weight, that every step builds a path. In this way, Proverbs becomes a light in a noisy world. It is not just a collection of sayings. It is a shield against deception. It teaches the reader how to resist folly, not by force, but by clarity. It opens the eyes to what is truly at stake, and it empowers the heart to choose well. In the battle between two voices, wisdom remains the guide that leads not only to better days, but to a better life. At its core, the Book of Proverbs is a conversation. It is not abstract theory or detached principle. It is the voice of one who loves, guiding the one who is loved. Again and again, the reader encounters the phrase, "My son." This is not a literary flourish. It is a thread that runs through the entire text, drawing us into the intimacy of a father's instruction. Proverbs is not a lecture, it is a letter. And behind that letter stands a heart, not merely firm with authority, but warm with affection. In the immediate context, many of these proverbs are written from Solomon to his sons. As a king and a father, Solomon understood both the weight of responsibility and the vulnerability of youth. He saw the dangers that could ensnare the careless. He recognized how easily strength could be wasted and how subtly integrity could erode. His words were not cold mandates. They were pleas wrapped in wisdom. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 8 captures this tone. "Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching." It is not a command shouted from a distance. It is a call spoken from closeness. But beyond the earthly relationship between father and son lies a greater echo. The repeated voice of a father in Proverbs is more than Solomon's. It is God's. This book, though penned by human hands, carries the voice of the Heavenly Father speaking to his children. Every line, every warning, every encouragement flows from divine love. It is not just about what God wants us to do. It is about why he wants it. His instructions are not burdens to bear, but paths to life. His corrections are not punishments, but protections. This fatherly tone becomes clearer when one notices how Proverbs begins. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 2 says the book exists to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight. But verse 3 continues, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity. This is the language of formation, not just regulation. It is about shaping character, not enforcing rules. It is about building someone from the inside out. Only a father who deeply loves his child takes the kind of time. The warnings scattered throughout Proverbs are often intense. They speak of ruin, of disgrace, of calamity. But they are never voiced with glee. They come with sorrow, with urgency, with a desire to prevent pain rather than punish mistakes. When Proverbs warns about the path of the adulterous woman, or the danger of greed, or the pride that leads to a fall, it is not an expression of condemnation. It is the voice of a father standing at the edge of a cliff, calling out to a child who does not see the drop ahead. God's love is not vague sentiment. It is detailed and direct. He does not offer affection that overlooks danger. He offers love that speaks clearly even when it stings. Proverbs chapter 3 verses 11 and 12 say, "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, or be weary of his reproof. For the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son in whom he delights." This redefines correction. It shows that discipline is not rejection. It is evidence of care. The father does not abandon the foolish. He pursues them. He calls them back. He corrects not to shame, but to restore. This tenderness is found even in the way Proverbs praises what is good. When it exalts humility, it is because God delights in the lowly. When it honors generosity, it is because God sees the giver and rejoices. When it uplifts integrity, it is because God desires to see his children walk in freedom. There is no manipulation in these exhortations. Only desire that we would walk in a way that leads to flourishing. In Proverbs chapter 4, the father recounts his own upbringing. Verse 3 says, "When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother, he taught me." Here, wisdom is not abstract. It is generational. It is passed down, treasured, and multiplied. This passage reveals that the act of instruction is an act of love. It is not distant. It is close, born out of relationship. And in the larger spiritual picture, it is the Father in heaven remembering how he has always dealt with his people, not as a tyrant issuing orders, but as a parent forming hearts. The very structure of Proverbs reflects this relational dynamic. It does not begin with a list of commands. It begins with a call to listen. It is shaped like a dialogue, not a decree. Even the moments of rebuke are framed with purpose and affection. There is a desire behind every directive, a longing behind every law. It is not about control, it is about care. It is not about suppression, it is about shaping a soul toward joy and lasting peace. This understanding transforms how we read the book. If one approaches Proverbs as a set of rigid expectations, it can feel overwhelming, even discouraging. But if one reads it as a love letter, a father's heart poured out in guidance, it becomes a treasure. Every verse, even the hard ones, takes on new tone and meaning. They become the words of someone who sees what we cannot see, who knows what lies ahead, who longs not to restrict us, but to lead us safely through. God's longing for our joy is embedded in every command. His desire for our safety echoes in every warning. His vision for our success shines through every principle. He is not interested in behavior modification for its own sake. He is interested in communion and trust, in walking together. His wisdom is not an obstacle, it is an embrace. The heart of the Father is not distant. It leans in. It speaks plainly. It offers truth, not to overwhelm, but to awaken. And when we listen, we hear more than instructions. We hear love. A love that warns because it cares. A love that guides because it cherishes. A love that will not remain silent while danger approaches, or while foolishness whispers lies. A love that offers wisdom not as a reward for the perfect, but as a lifeline for the beloved. To read Proverbs rightly is to feel that love. To hear the voice of a father who does not give up, who does not turn away, who keeps calling through every verse, "My child, listen to me. I want you to live. I want you to walk in peace. I want you to become who I created you to be." The surface of Proverbs often glitters with clarity. It provides a reliable compass for right and wrong, wise and foolish, righteous and wicked. It is a book filled with imperatives, contrasts, and calls to action. Yet to view Proverbs merely as a handbook for moral behavior is to stop too soon. Beneath the practical guidance lies a deeper process. Proverbs does not merely aim to correct actions. It seeks to shape identity. Its goal is not behavior modification. It is spiritual transformation. This difference is critical. Morality can exist apart from relationship. It can be maintained by pressure, by fear, by performance. But Proverbs invites the reader into something more enduring. It invites transformation from within. It is not satisfied with outward conformity. It aims for inward change. It does not simply ask, "Are you doing the right thing?" It presses further, asking, "What kind of person are you becoming?" This distinction becomes evident in the way Proverbs speaks about the heart. Again and again, it returns to this theme, not as a poetic motif, but as a spiritual focal point. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says, "Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life." This verse does not speak of external behavior. It speaks of the inner wellspring from which all actions arise. It reveals that lasting change begins not in the hands, but in the heart. If the heart is guarded, formed, and purified, then what flows from it, words, decisions, attitudes, will reflect that inner life. The wisdom of Proverbs is therefore not content to simply warn against lying, stealing, pride, or laziness. It aims to uncover what fuels those patterns. It seeks to confront the envy that leads to resentment, the insecurity that drives deceit, the pride that resists correction. It speaks to motives, not just habits. It goes beneath the surface to uncover what is hidden and to bring it into the light for renewal. This is why reading Proverbs can sometimes feel uncomfortable. It exposes. It probes. It brings to attention what one might prefer to overlook. But this discomfort is not cruelty. It is surgery. Proverbs acts like a chisel in the hands of a master sculptor, shaping character with every stroke. It chips away at what is false, selfish, or misaligned. It does not destroy. It reveals what was always meant to be there. Each correction is not destruction. It is refinement. Consider the many verses that speak to humility. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 2 says, "When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble is wisdom." This is not just instruction to act humbly, it is a call to become humble. Not to pretend to be lowly, but to genuinely see oneself rightly before God. The aim is not polished performance, but purified posture. Pride may mimic strength, but wisdom knows that only humility can receive what is true. The proud resist correction. The humble are changed by it. Or look at how Proverbs addresses generosity. It does not treat giving as a box to be checked. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 25 says, "Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered." This reflects a heart that overflows, not one that performs out of obligation. Generosity in Proverbs is not about image, it is about identity. The wise give because they have been shaped by something greater than self-interest. They give because their heart has been softened by wisdom, by compassion, by understanding what truly matters. Even in its warnings, Proverbs forms rather than simply forbids. When it speaks about gossip, it is not only discouraging a specific act, it is addressing the kind of heart that finds pleasure in the downfall of others. Proverbs chapter 18 verse 8 says, "The words of a whisperer are like delicious morsels. They go down into the inner parts of the body." The imagery reveals the way gossip feeds something deeper than curiosity. It feeds insecurity, envy, even malice. So wisdom calls for change, not just in behavior, but in appetite. Not just in speech, but in spirit. This shaping work is not self-generated. It is not the result of willpower or human discipline alone. The wisdom of Proverbs, though practical, is deeply spiritual. It assumes dependence on God. It assumes that transformation comes not by trying harder, but by walking closer. Proverbs chapter 3 verse 6 says, "In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths." This is not about managing life efficiently. It is about submitting the whole self to divine direction. It is about forming a life that flows in harmony with the character of God. To be formed by Proverbs is to be continually realigned. Life often bends the heart away from wisdom. Distraction, pressure, temptation, and wounds all twist desires and cloud judgment. But wisdom brings the soul back to center. It restores clarity where there was confusion. It purifies motives that have been mixed. It brings alignment between what is known to be true and how life is lived in response. This formation is slow but sure. It happens through repetition, through reflection, through small decisions made daily. It is the kind of change that others begin to see before we do. It emerges in gentler words, in quieter confidence, in deeper patience. It takes shape not in grand displays, but in unseen moments. It is the kind of growth that only wisdom can produce. Importantly, Proverbs teaches that becoming wise is not a destination, but a direction. It is not something one claims, but something one continually seeks. Proverbs chapter 9 verse 9 says, "Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning." This verse reveals a paradox. Those who are truly wise never believe they have arrived. They remain teachable. They are not defensive. They are formed by instruction rather than hardened by it. This is what makes Proverbs more than morality. Morality can be mimicked. Wisdom cannot. Morality may conform externally while hiding rot within. Wisdom cleans from the inside out. Morality often ends at action. Wisdom begins at desire. It is not satisfied with doing the right thing for the wrong reason. It calls for wholeness, a life where belief and behavior match, where motives are pure, where integrity is real. In this way, Proverbs serves not as a scoreboard, but as a sculptor. It does not ask the reader to prove something. It invites them to become something. It is not a mirror that reflects how good someone already is. It is a tool that shapes what they are still becoming. And the hands that wield that tool belong to God Himself. He uses His wisdom not to crush, but to create. Not to shame, but to shape. Those who submit to this process will find that over time, they are no longer merely trying to be wise. They are becoming wise. Not through effort alone, but through formation. Not by collecting more rules, but by receiving a new heart. This is the power of Proverbs, not just to inform, but to transform. Not just to correct behavior, but to cultivate the image of God in the soul. Throughout the book of Proverbs, there is a recurring emphasis on speech, on the weight, the consequence, and the reach of the words we choose. Few subjects receive as much attention. Verse after verse returns to the tongue, not out of redundancy, but because words are central to the human experience and the spiritual life. Proverbs understands what modern society often forgets, that language is not neutral. It is powerful. It shapes relationships, directs lives, and reveals the state of the heart. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21 states it plainly and powerfully. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. This is not exaggeration. It is spiritual truth. Words can destroy reputations, poison trust, and ignite conflict, but they can also build up, restore dignity, and bring peace. They have the capacity to reflect God's character or to echo the enemy's lies. In Proverbs, the tongue is not just a tool of communication. It is a force of influence, a vessel of either healing or harm. Consider how Proverbs describes the potential for harm. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 18 says, "There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. The image is not subtle." Rash speech is equated with violence. It pierces, it wounds, it leaves scars. The harm of careless or cruel words is not just emotional, it is deeply spiritual. It affects identity, distorts truth, and separates people from one another. Gossip, slander, insults, and lies do not just damage situations, they damage souls. This is why Proverbs places such high value on restraint. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 19 says, "When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. Silence, when chosen wisely, is not weakness, it is strength." The wise do not speak just to fill space. They speak when their words will serve a purpose, when they will build up rather than tear down. In a world driven by commentary and noise, where every moment seems to demand an opinion, the wisdom of restraint is a rare and vital gift. But the Proverbs also celebrate the creative and restorative power of words. Words are not only to be withheld in caution, they are to be used in blessing. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 24 says, "Gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body. Speech, when guided by wisdom, becomes nourishment. It strengthens the weary, comforts the anxious, and restores what was broken." Words can be balm in a world full of wounds. They can reach places that actions alone cannot touch. This power is most profound when words align with truth. Flattery and manipulation may sound pleasing, but they are ultimately empty. Proverbs chapter 26, verse 28 warns, "A lying tongue hates its victims, and a flattering mouth works ruin. Words without truth are deceitful. They may mask intentions, but they cannot heal." Real power is found not in saying what someone wants to hear, but in speaking what is needed with love and courage. Wisdom does not manipulate emotions, it ministers to the heart. Speech also plays a vital role in conflict. Proverbs recognizes that tension between people is inevitable, but it is often inflamed or diffused by the words chosen in response. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1 teaches, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." This is not merely behavioral instruction, it is spiritual insight. The way one responds in moments of tension can either invite peace or escalate division. A gentle word does not mean surrender. It means strength under control. It means prioritizing restoration over pride. Proverbs also warns about the trap of talking too much. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 28 offers a striking observation. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. Wisdom is often expressed not in what is said, but in the decision not to speak at all. Silence can be a shelter from foolishness. It can be a space where emotions settle and clarity returns. The wise understand that not every thought deserves to be spoken, and not every feeling must be verbalized. Discernment is knowing the difference. This theme of speech is not limited to conversation. It extends to self-talk, to what one declares over life and circumstance. The Proverbs encourage a voice that speaks with confidence in God's truth rather than despair or complaint. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 25 says, "Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad." This is not just about what we say to others. It includes what we choose to say to ourselves. A good word, rooted in truth, has power to lift burdens and shift perspectives. In modern life, where speech is no longer limited to the spoken word, where posts, texts, comments, and messages are extensions of the tongue, this wisdom is more relevant than ever. The digital world has made it easier to speak without thinking, to wound without seeing the hurt, to vent without considering the consequence. But Proverbs holds steady. It reminds us that the medium may change, but the moral responsibility remains. Every word still matters. Every phrase still carries weight. The power of words is not merely psychological. It is spiritual. This is why the tongue must be submitted to God. Proverbs does not offer strategies for polite conversation. It offers guidance for righteous speech. It is not concerned with charm but with character. The wise understand that words are seeds. They are sown into hearts, into relationships, into the future. And what is sown in time will grow. This truth transforms how we speak. It leads to words chosen with intention. Words that give life, not take it. Words that reflect the wisdom of God rather than the impulse of the moment. Words that are full of grace, seasoned with truth, directed by love. It reminds the speaker that every conversation is a sacred opportunity, an opportunity to encourage, to teach, to comfort, to heal. When one realizes the depth of what Proverbs teaches about speech, it becomes clear that the mouth is not just an instrument of expression. It is a gateway to the heart. What comes out of the mouth reveals what is stored within. The goal is not to polish speech while leaving the heart unchanged. The goal is to let wisdom fill the heart so fully that wise speech becomes the natural overflow. To speak wisely is not just to be heard. It is to honor God. It is to recognize that every word echoes, every sentence leaves a mark, every conversation shapes a moment, a relationship, a legacy. Proverbs teaches us that the tongue is not to be underestimated. It holds the power of life and death, and wisdom invites us to choose life. Proverbs has long been admired for its practical insights. It speaks to matters of work ethic, stewardship, generosity, and the consequences of choices, and because of this, it is often approached as a manual for achieving success. Some see in its verses a divine strategy for accumulating wealth, securing influence, and building a respected reputation. Indeed, Proverbs does not shy away from acknowledging the tangible outcomes of wise living. It praises diligence, warns against debt, and honors honest gain. But if one stops there, if one reads it only as a path to temporal reward, they miss its greater promise. The true wealth of Proverbs lies not in what it gives now, but in what it prepares us for. From its very opening, Proverbs frames wisdom as something more valuable than gold, silver, or jewels. Proverbs chapter 3 verse 14 declares, "For the gain from her is better than gain from silver, and her profit better than gold." And verse 15 continues, "She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her." These are not poetic exaggerations. They are a recalibration of value. They redirect desire away from the temporary and toward the eternal. Wisdom is not merely a means to wealth. It is wealth itself, the kind that endures beyond this life. Earthly gain is fleeting. It can be lost, stolen, or spent. It is vulnerable to decay, to mismanagement, to the uncontrollable tides of circumstance. But wisdom, true wisdom, is not subject to these threats. It holds its worth across every season, every stage of life, and every trial. It does not vanish in hardship. It does not depreciate with age. It is the one investment that guarantees a return, not in coins or credit, but in character, in peace, and in eternal reward. This shift in perspective is crucial. Proverbs is not opposed to financial success. It recognizes the value of provision, the virtue of hard work, and the goodness of responsible living. But it never exalts wealth as the ultimate prize. Instead, it consistently points to something deeper. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 1 says, "A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver or gold." This redefinition of success is not subtle, it is radical. It teaches that what is stored in the soul is of more consequence than what is stored in the bank. This is the currency of the kingdom. Wisdom teaches us to measure value differently, to see success not as a number, but as a reflection of godliness, to count integrity as gain, and to count selfishness, even when profitable, as loss. Proverbs does not separate spiritual life from daily life, it unites them. It shows that how one manages time, money, relationships, and decisions is not just practical, it is spiritual. Each choice reveals what is truly treasured. Consider the contrast between wisdom and folly in terms of reward. The fool may seem to prosper for a season. They may cut corners, manipulate, lie, and even succeed by the world's standards. But their gain is fragile. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 18 says, "The wicked earns deceptive wages, but one who sows righteousness gets a sure reward. There is a reward that appears quickly but fades, and there is one that grows slowly but lasts." Wisdom always leads to the latter. Proverbs repeatedly links wisdom with righteousness, justice, humility, and the fear of the Lord. These qualities are not always celebrated by the world. They do not always bring immediate applause or prosperity. But in the eyes of God, they are treasure. Proverbs chapter 15 verse 16 says, "Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble with it." This verse calls the reader to realign their pursuit, not to despise success, but to desire it in its true form. The fear of the Lord, the pursuit of righteousness, the cultivation of wisdom, these are investments that eternity honors. What does it mean to be rich in God's eyes? It means to walk in integrity when no one is watching. It means to give freely without expecting in return. It means to pursue truth even when it costs something. It means to place faithfulness above fortune. The wise are those who do not trade eternal reward for temporary comfort. They live with a long view in mind. They are not ruled by the urgency of now, but guided by the clarity of forever. Wisdom prepares the soul for what cannot be seen. It shapes desires so that they align with what is lasting. It teaches that life is not about accumulation, but about transformation. That joy does not come from what is possessed, but from who one is becoming. Proverbs invites the reader to see wealth not in terms of possessions, but in terms of peace. Proverbs chapter 3 verse 17 speaks of wisdom's paths, saying, "Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace." This is the kind of prosperity the world cannot offer. In God's economy, the riches of wisdom are not stored in vaults, but in hearts. They are seen in kindness, in discernment, in self-control, in patience, in courage. They are measured not by abundance, but by alignment with the character of Christ. The wise may or may not accumulate wealth in this life, but they always accumulate treasure in heaven. Their lives bear fruit that outlasts time. And this is where Proverbs reaches its deepest purpose, not just to guide life now, but to prepare for life eternal. It is not merely interested in making life work better. It is interested in forming souls fit for the kingdom of God. It teaches the kind of wisdom that will still matter when everything else fades. Proverbs chapter 10 verse 2 says, "Treasures gained by wickedness do not profit, but righteousness delivers from death." The final reward of wisdom is not success, it is salvation. Not status, but eternal standing before God. This wisdom cannot be purchased. It is given. It is received through reverence, through pursuit, through surrender. It cannot be hoarded. It must be lived. And when it is, it bears witness to a kingdom not built by hands, but by heaven. The wise live not for the applause of today, but for the approval of eternity. They invest in what cannot be measured by markets or monitored by others. They seek treasure that moth and rust cannot destroy, and thieves cannot steal. So Proverbs becomes not only a guide for living, but a preparation for forever. Its rewards are not merely seen in bank accounts or accolades, but in peace, in purpose, in intimacy with God. Wisdom's currency is eternal, and those who walk in it carry a wealth that no one can take away. Proverbs is rich with instruction on how to live wisely, speak carefully, and act justly. But threaded through its verses is a recurring theme that goes beyond personal conduct. It is the theme of connection. Over and over again, the book emphasizes the power of relationships, the influence of companionship, and the unavoidable truth that who we walk with shapes who we become. Proverbs chapter 13 verse 20 puts it plainly, "Walk with the wise and become wise." Associate with fools and get in trouble. Wisdom is not only taught, it is caught, cultivated in the soil of community. This verse reveals more than a warning. It unveils a principle. Character is contagious. The people one chooses to walk beside have the power to sharpen or dull, to elevate or degrade. Wisdom is not formed in isolation. It grows best in proximity to others who pursue the same path. Proverbs does not picture the wise as solitary sages, but as travelers walking a road together, offering guidance, encouragement, and accountability along the way. The call to walk with the wise is a call to intentional community. It is a rejection of passivity in relationships. It challenges the reader to evaluate not just what they believe, but who they trust. Not just what they read, but who they follow. Wisdom is not only found in books, it is found in people. God places truth in others as a gift, and those who are humble enough to seek it will grow because of it. Mentorship is one of the most powerful expressions of this principle. Throughout Proverbs, the imagery of a father instructing a son is more than biological, it is spiritual. It reflects the transmission of wisdom across generations. It is a reminder that no one is born wise. Everyone begins somewhere, and the journey forward is made lighter by those who have walked the road before. Seeking out godly mentors is not weakness, it is wisdom. It shows a heart that values learning more than pride. Proverbs chapter 19 verse 20 says, "Listen to advice and accept instruction, that you may gain wisdom in the future." This is the attitude of a learner. It is a posture that invites growth. It recognizes that insight often comes from outside oneself, from another voice, another perspective, another experience. And when that voice is rooted in godliness, the result is formation, not just information. But community is not only about mentorship, it is about mutual sharpening. Proverbs chapter 27 verse 17 declares, "Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another." This image is powerful. Sharpening is not gentle. It requires contact, friction, and precision. It is a process that improves both edges. In the same way, wise community challenges, corrects, refines, and strengthens. It brings out clarity. It removes dullness. It turns good intentions into godly action. This kind of relationship cannot be built on flattery or superficial agreement. It requires honesty, trust, and commitment. It thrives on truth spoken in love, even when it is hard to hear. Proverbs chapter 27 verse 6 says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy." True friends do not always say what is comfortable. They say what is needed. They are willing to confront in order to protect. Their love does not withhold truth. Their loyalty is expressed not just in presence, but in honesty. Godly community also brings accountability. It provides a mirror and a compass. When someone begins to drift, wise companions notice. They speak. They act. They remind the soul of what is true when emotions cloud judgment. This is not control, it is care. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 14 says, "Where there is no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors there is safety." Accountability is not about micromanagement. It is about mutual support, shared wisdom, and collective strength. In a culture that often idolizes independence, Proverbs calls for interdependence. It does not present the wise person as self-sufficient, but as deeply rooted in relationships that nourish and stretch them. The proud isolate. The wise integrate. They understand that solitude may feel strong for a moment, but it often leads to stagnation. Community invites growth that solitude cannot provide. This is especially true in the body of Christ. The church is not a gathering of perfect people. It is a family of those being formed. It is the place where wisdom is shared, where burdens are carried together, and where counsel is given with love and clarity. Within the church, spiritual gifts, experiences, and insights are distributed not to elevate individuals, but to edify the whole. Proverbs finds its living application in this context. It comes to life in conversations, in prayer, in confession, in shared meals, and shared missions. Proverbs chapter 15 verse 22 adds another layer. Without counsel plans fail, but with many advisors they succeed. Wisdom is not just about knowing what is right. It is about seeking insight before moving forward. Even the most gifted minds need guidance. Even the most passionate hearts need perspective. Success in Proverbs is not the result of individual brilliance, but of communal discernment. To walk with the wise is to walk in humility. It is to admit that others may see what we miss. It is to believe that God often speaks through the mouths of those around us. It is to open our lives to input, to correction, to encouragement. It is to say, "I want to grow, and I know I cannot do it alone." This path is not always easy. True community requires vulnerability. It involves risk, but the reward is profound. In walking with the wise, we walk more steadily, more clearly, more faithfully. We gain not just knowledge, but character. We become more grounded, more discerning, more in tune with the heart of God. In contrast, the danger of walking with fools is not just moral, it is spiritual. Fools do not value truth. They do not seek wisdom. They elevate impulse, flatter ego, and blur the line between right and wrong. Their counsel leads not to clarity, but to compromise. And Proverbs makes it clear, to align with fools is to invite trouble, not just by association, but by influence. Therefore, Proverbs calls the reader to choose wisely, not just in action, but in allegiance. Who we walk with is not a casual decision. It is a spiritual strategy. It is the soil in which wisdom will either thrive or wither. The wise do not walk alone. They walk together, humble, attentive, accountable, and strengthened by the presence of others who seek the same goal. There is a quiet expectation that often follows the reading of Proverbs. If I live wisely, life will work. The structure of the book seems to support this idea. Over and over again, it presents clear cause and effect statements. The diligent will prosper. The righteous will be honored. The one who fears the Lord will find life. It reads like a divine equation. live wisely, reap blessing. Avoid folly, escape disaster. And in many ways, these truths hold. Wisdom does lead to flourishing. Obedience does bring peace. But life in a broken world does not always move in straight lines. Eventually, even the most faithful reader of Proverbs will encounter a moment that does not match the pattern. A righteous person suffers. A hard worker is overlooked. A kind heart is betrayed. A careful planner sees everything unravel. And suddenly, the simplicity of the Proverbs feels out of reach. The formula no longer fits. And the soul begins to ask, what happened? Where did I go wrong? Why is wisdom not working the way I expected? This tension is not a failure in the text. It is a feature of divine wisdom. Proverbs was never meant to explain all of life. It offers clarity, but it does not claim to provide closure. It reveals patterns, not guarantees. It teaches what is generally true in God's ordered world, but it does not ignore that this world is also fractured by sin, pain, and mystery. And for that reason, Proverbs must be read alongside other voices in the wisdom tradition, especially Job and Ecclesiastes. The book of Job shatters the illusion that righteous living always results in immediate reward. Job was blameless, upright, God-fearing. He walked in wisdom. And yet, his life was torn apart without warning. He lost his wealth, his children, his health, and even the comfort of friendship. His story introduces a painful but necessary truth that suffering is not always the result of folly, and prosperity is not always the evidence of righteousness. Job's life confronts the shallow reading of Proverbs and deepens it. It reminds us that God's justice is not always visible on the surface of our circumstances. Job's comforters try to apply the logic of Proverbs to his suffering. They assume he must have sinned, because surely such suffering must be deserved. But their counsel, though rooted in familiar patterns, lacks the humility that true wisdom requires. God himself rebukes them, not because Proverbs is false, but because they misused it. They turned wisdom into a weapon, into a rigid system, forgetting that divine wisdom also includes mystery, timing, and grace. Ecclesiastes, likewise, adds another layer. It speaks with a voice of disillusionment, of reflection forged in the fires of life's unpredictability. I have seen everything under the sun, the teacher says in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 15. In my vain life, I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evil doing. These are not observations made in rebellion. They are spoken from deep awareness. Ecclesiastes does not deny the value of wisdom. It affirms it. But it also acknowledges that wisdom does not remove suffering, and that even the wise will one day die. It pulls the heart back to humility, to dependence on God, not on outcomes. When life does not go according to plan, these companion texts protect the reader from despair. They remind us that Proverbs was never a promise of ease. It was a path of formation. It was never a tool to control life. It was a call to walk with God through whatever life brings. The wise do not expect life to be fair. They expect God to be faithful. And He is, even when the results seem slow, hidden, or entirely different than expected. This broader perspective helps make sense of the times when wisdom seems to fail, when the door does not open, when the prayer goes unanswered, when the betrayal comes anyway. In those moments, the heart does not need explanation. It needs presence. It needs the assurance that God sees, that God knows, that God still leads. And this is where true wisdom begins to shine, not in predictable outcomes, but in persevering trust. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 remains an anchor in such times. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. This is not a call to stop thinking. It is a call to trust when thinking is not enough. It acknowledges that wisdom includes knowing what cannot be known and still choosing to believe. It invites the soul to rest, not in clarity, but in the character of God. This is where the wisdom of Proverbs meets the reality of brokenness. It does not collapse under pressure. It becomes more precious. It teaches that walking in integrity matters, even when no one sees. That speaking truth matters, even when lies seem to win. That choosing patience, kindness, and discipline matters, even when the payoff is not immediate. Because wisdom is not measured by result, but by alignment with God's heart. There is a quiet strength in this kind of wisdom. It does not boast. It does not guarantee applause. But it holds. It endures. It walks through the valley with clarity, even when it cannot see the mountaintop. It refuses to trade integrity for comfort or faith for explanation. It trusts that God is doing more than we can perceive, and that eternal reward outweighs temporary struggle. In a broken world, wisdom is not fragile. It is resilient. It understands that storms do not negate the value of the foundation, they prove it. And so, the wise do not despair when life unravels. They press in. They listen more closely. They lean not on formulas, but on the Father. They remain rooted in truth, even as the wind blows. This is the deeper invitation of Proverbs, not to escape suffering, but to navigate it with faith, to hold to what is true when feelings falter, to walk in obedience when the outcomes are unclear, to live not for immediate reward, but for eternal glory. In this way, wisdom becomes more than a path to success. It becomes a lifeline in the dark, a compass in the fog, a refuge when the storm does not pass. By the time one reaches the final words of Proverbs, something becomes clear. It is not merely a book to be studied. It is an invitation to be changed. Its purpose was never just to inform the mind, but to transform the heart. It was not written to be admired from a distance, but to be absorbed, internalized, and lived. The wisdom of Proverbs is not simply a collection of truths, it is a calling. It beckons every reader to go beyond appreciation and move into imitation, not just to follow wisdom, but to become wise. This journey is deeply personal. It cannot be outsourced. No one can become wise on your behalf. It begins with a decision to take the words of Proverbs seriously, not as suggestions or ancient sayings, but as sacred instructions from the heart of God. And from that decision, transformation begins. Slowly, quietly, daily. It is not a flash of revelation. It is a long obedience in the same direction. It is letting wisdom take root and grow until it becomes the framework of thought, the rhythm of speech, the pattern of life. Proverbs does not offer shortcuts. It does not flatter the lazy or excuse the indifferent. It calls for intention. It demands attention. It asks the reader to reflect, to examine, to choose. Proverbs chapter 2 verses 2 to 5 say, "Make your ear attentive to wisdom and incline your heart to understanding." Yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Notice the language. Make your ear attentive. Incline your heart. Call out. Raise your voice. This is not passive reading. This is pursuit. The journey to becoming wise begins with humility. It begins with the realization that wisdom does not arise naturally. It must be received. Sought, asked for. Solomon, the author of much of Proverbs, became wise not because he was born that way, but because he asked. In 1 Kings chapter 3, Solomon stood before God and requested not riches or revenge, but wisdom and understanding heart. And God was pleased with the request. He gave Solomon what he asked for and more. That same invitation is open today. James chapter 1 verse 5 declares, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him." This is not wishful thinking. It is a promise. God delights to give wisdom to those who want it not for pride, but for purpose. Not for status, but for service. To ask for wisdom is to confess need, to acknowledge dependence, to say with sincerity that one cannot navigate life alone. But asking is only the beginning. Becoming wise requires practice. It is formed in decisions, in habits, and the thousands of small moments that make up a life. Wisdom does not suddenly appear. It grows. It is shaped in the silence before responding in anger. It is forged in the choice to listen when one wants to speak. It is formed in integrity when compromise is easier. It is strengthened by correction, deepened by reflection, and revealed in the way one treats the weak, the unnoticed, the difficult. To let Proverbs shape the soul is to welcome correction. Proverbs chapter 12 verse 1 says, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid." It is direct. And it is true. The wise are not those who never they are those who learn, who receive rebuke with gratitude, who are more interested in growth than image. Every correction, when accepted humbly, becomes another stroke of the chisel shaping a soul to reflect the character of God. The transformation Proverbs calls for cannot be achieved by effort alone. It requires the Spirit of God. Wisdom is not merely about decision-making. It is spiritual alignment. It is living in step with the Holy Spirit. Galatians chapter 5 describes the fruit of such a life: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These are not separate from wisdom. They are the outworking of it. The Spirit and wisdom walk together. One teaches, the other empowers. To walk in wisdom is to live alert, to see each moment as sacred, to ask questions that dig deeper. Is this response rooted in pride or love? Is this decision shaped by fear or by faith? Is this habit pulling me closer to the image of Christ or further away? These questions, when asked regularly, begin to reshape not just behavior, but identity. They bring life into alignment with truth. Over time, the difference becomes visible. Wisdom is seen in a quiet confidence, not arrogance; in steadiness, not haste; in compassion that listens and truth that speaks with grace; in decisions made not for applause, but for righteousness. A life shaped by Proverbs begins to reflect the beauty of balance: fear of the Lord with joy, strength with gentleness, discipline with mercy. It becomes a life others trust, seek out, and learn from, not because it is perfect, but because it is real. This shaping is not just for individual benefit. It becomes a gift to others. A wise person becomes a refuge for the confused, a guide for the young, a voice of reason in a storm. Their presence carries peace. Their words carry weight. Their counsel carries clarity. And their life, quietly and steadily, points beyond themselves to the source of their wisdom. Letting Proverbs shape the soul is not about appearing wise. It is about becoming whole. It is about being healed of foolishness, of impulsiveness, of pride. It is about being set free from the need to be right, the pressure to be impressive, the fear of being unseen. It is about being formed into someone who walks with God not just in belief, but in action, who lives not for the praise of people, but for the smile of heaven. This is the invitation that Proverbs offers. It does not end with its final chapter. Its wisdom echoes beyond the page. It calls the reader to begin wherever they are. to ask for wisdom, to receive it, to live it, to let every verse be more than instruction. Let it be formation. Let it become part of the soul. The goal is not to master the text, but to be mastered by the truth, to be changed until wisdom is no longer just something known, but something lived, something breathed, something seen, until the life of the reader begins to echo the wisdom of the writer. If this message has encouraged you, helped you see Proverbs in a new light, or stirred something deep within your soul, I invite you to take a moment and support this channel. Please subscribe so you don't miss future messages that speak life, truth, and wisdom into your walk. Click the like button. It helps more than you know and tells the platform this kind of content matters. Leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your favorite proverb, or how this message spoke to you. Your words could be the encouragement someone else needs to hear. And share this video with someone you love, a friend, a family member, a co-worker. You never know how a simple act of sharing can plant a seed of truth in someone else's life. Thank you for walking this path of wisdom. May the journey continue, and may you become not just a hearer of wisdom, but its living echo in a world that so desperately needs it. Until next time, walk wisely.